Hello, this is Reverend Christie Hardwick, and welcome to the Wisdom Wednesday Consciousness Cafe. Today I have with me a dear friend, colleague, and mentor, and goddess, and all kinds of things, Selisse Berry. Hi, Selisse.
Hi, Christy.
So glad that you're here with us today. So Selisse and I have a wonderful history. I think it's wonderful because I met Selisse early in the 90s, and she was a one-woman show coming around to corporations, and she didn't just like go to any corporation. She went to Fortune 500s and knocked on the door of the one I happened to be working in community relations for at the time, and said, I know this is supposed to be a really great company and everything, and I just want you to know that in terms of how you're dealing with your lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender employees, we think you can do better. I think you can do better. And it's like, wow, okay, who are you? What's going on? And we were open to the conversation, and that kind of conversation morphed into something so amazing that we'll get into during this interview. But so I was an early adopter, was fascinated by the idea of making sure equality was happening inside the company I was working for in Silicon Graphics, in the Silicon Valley, all the high tech companies. And so fast forward, I worked on a program inside the company, but I didn't really connect with Selisse again for almost a decade. And then I was out of corporate, facilitating retreats for leaders, and lo and behold, who's in the room? But Selisse Berry. And at that time, a decade later, then I was invited by Selisse to go to what was called the Out and Equal Workplace Advocates Summit. And there were thousands of people there, many, many hundreds of Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 1000 companies, many of the top 100 companies there, interacting and working on the platform of equality in the workplace. So that path over that short period of time was just amazing to behold. And we got to work together quite a bit over the years, but there's more. So let me start with Selisse. I just really want to ask you first, because I know your story, and you recently wrote a piece which is so beautiful that gets even more in depth about it. But let's just start with that 7-year-old girl who had a question for her dad. I really want to know that story about what happened.
Well, thanks, Christy. I echo all your comments about it being a wonderful relationship, both personal and professional, over these wonderful years. Yeah, I remember vividly standing there with my dad, who I was very close to, in church, and the minister was talking about goodwill toward men, and he kept using the word man. And so after church, I asked my dad, why wasn't he talking about me or my sisters or my mom? And he said, oh, the word man means everybody. And that was, in fact, the answer I got even many years later when I was in seminary. The word man means everybody. I'm like, why don't you just use the word everybody? And I had a whole journey through a Presbyterian seminary and which I can talk more about, but that was one of the moments that inspired me to think bigger and think about justice and think about equality.
Beautiful. So I love this idea that you're a 7-year-old is already saying, something's not right with this picture. I love that the 7-year-old's consciousness said right away, I didn't sound like I'm included in that. So this consciousness you had at a very, very early age of inclusion was just so powerful for you. And I've met more LGBTQ people who actually started out in some kind of spiritual religious tradition and actually wanted to lead in it. And of course, there were a lot of barriers to that. I was surprised to find that out. So you had that path. And tell me more about why you went to seminary. Why did you choose to go to seminary?
Well, I was after college, I majored in education and guidance counseling, and I went for a time and worked at a wilderness camp for emotionally disturbed girls, and ended up getting a master's in special education, and thought that I would be a teacher or a guidance counselor. but I was very interested again in social justice work, and a lot of that 7-year-old spirit was kind of the flames were fanned by my own experience as a youth group leader. I was the president of my senior high fellowship group in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we did trips, social justice trips. And that was what I had a lot of passion for, is really working in social justice. And in Dallas, Texas, where I was living at the time teaching school, after my wilderness experience, I looked around to see who was doing social justice work, and it was very much part of the church. It was, these lesbian nuns and lots of, and I was, I was involved in a church that was pretty much, was committed to social justice, but I just had this yearning to do more. And so it felt like the seminary was a good avenue to pursue that career dream.
Isn't that interesting that, based on where you were, you didn't look around and find a bunch of nonprofit, social justice organizations that called you, but it looked like it was being done through this vehicle. So it was really, so the calling was really about the social justice, not so much the religious aspect then. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So
it was interesting because, as you said, there's so many people in the LGBTQ community that have had some kind of seminary experience. In fact, even in San Francisco, after I became a leader in the movement and brought a bunch of executive directors together, there were like 11 people there, and 9 of us had gone to seminary or some kind of, had some spiritual schooling.
interesting, isn't that? So tell me more about what you think woke up your social consciousness. You mentioned that you noticed some things that were happening and you were drawn to it, but why were you drawn to justice? I don't know anything about Stillwater, Oklahoma, but I don't know if it was a diverse community or not. But what is it that would have called you to justice? Because I know you're a person who is sensitive to the issues of gender and, of course, gender identity expression, but also of race and ethnicity.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It was one of those, I just had this very overwhelming sense of fairness. And as I mentioned, I was close to my dad, but my mother, I should say, and my mother she's an artist, and basically would have probably been happier if she'd just gone to New York and lived in Greenwich Village and was an artist. But instead of that, she was in Oklahoma and married to my dad and raising 3 children. So she wasn't a very affirming or, huggy person. And so there were lots of arguments with my mother, and I always ended by saying, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. And so there was, I guess, that piece. And then watching, just growing up during the civil rights movement, and literally, seeing, we didn't have a TV for a long time. And when you did, you turned it on and saw police and police dogs attacking African-American people. And and then as I got older, I remember my church almost splitting over the fact that the Presbyterian Church was giving money to Angela Davis's case, her legal fees. And that, and it was like, why would the church split over this? This is exactly what the church should be doing. And so it was a very naive kind of approach, obviously, but it was very committed and passionate.
Yes, but you're fierce about it. That's something that I know about you. So today's modern day story, because this is something you did, 20 years ago, I would say is the Stacey Abrams story. She was, denied her opportunity to do what it is she wanted to do, which was lead, a state. And instead of taking that defeat and that disappointment and just going away and licking her wounds, she created an organization all on the line, right, to help us fix this issue of gerrymandering and redlining and all the things that happen that keep the vote from really being as robust as it should be for people. And you did something similar, and you did it 25 years ago. you had a big disappointment. And instead of just sort of going in the corner and licking your wounds, you founded a movement. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I did just kind of show up to seminary thinking, that I would be a Presbyterian minister and do that work around social justice. And literally the first month of seminary, I started dating a woman and thought, what the hell is this all about? And finally came out to myself. I was in my late 20s. And of course, I was going to San Francisco Theological Seminary, which is in fact in Marin County, but a lot of people moved to San Francisco or the Bay Area to come out to go to gay bars. And but I was there in a theological seminary learning to be a minister. And I recognized, I was like, oh, I'm just going to share this. And the woman that I was dating is like, what are you talking about? You can't get ordained if you come out. And so everything was brand new to me. I was like, well, how do I get from where I am now to even knowing, LGBTQ people? And the whole thing was just a new horizon. But it was also a lot of, like, oh, that's what love songs are about. That's why people write love poetry. I could never quite get it when I was on dates with men. I'm like, I don't get this. So yeah, and then eventually I was really focused on the workplace because this was a career that I was denied. Essentially, the door was closed, and I went ahead and finished. It was a 4-year program at the time, and did a year-long internship. And that's when I, really came into myself as a lesbian, and then began to look around to see who was doing any work around LGBTQ workplace issues, and found a group of folks. And then that's when I started going door to door and making cold calls to people like yourself and others. And you are so warm and inviting. Many times I would say, I'm here to talk about your LGBTQ employees. And they would say, don't worry, Selisse, we don't have those people here. Mm. So even in the Bay Area, I would occasionally get that kind of comment. But little by little began building what Out and Equal is today, which is bringing thousands of people together from all over the world, from 60 countries.
Exactly. And also you've had it replicated in some form or shape or fashion in other major countries of the world, including Brazil and India, and I know in Italy also. And that's, that's your legacy. That's something that you've already created. You worked and put all your blood, sweat, tears, heart into it. And I had, like I said, I had a chance to work with you on some of the projects around that. And so many amazing people worked with you over the years to make it what it is today. And now it's there, and it's continuing, and it will continue for as long as it's necessary, right? But you have retired sort of, but not really, because now you find yourself on boards and you're working in the area of LGBTQ equality and protection, but it's found a different little avenue through you now. So what's on the horizon right now? You have a couple of
minutes. I am serving on a couple of boards. One is Equality Florida, since I'm a new Florida resident. Never thought I would live in Florida, but I am loving St. Pete and the new friends that I've made here and the community that I'm beginning to build. And then I work on with a couple of organizations that really focus on LGBTQ refugees. And as soon as I kind of handed my baby Out and Equal off to my successor, I did a lot of traveling, including going to Italy with you, Christie, and I was in Greece for about 6 weeks teaching English to refugees, and it was such an eye-opening experience. And I did ask around, it's like, is anybody doing work around LGBTQ refugees? And so I did connect with this wonderful man who is doing that work. And so now I'm on his board, Safe Place International, as well as another board with a former colleague from Out and Equal, Steve, with ORAM. So that's been really powerful. And then I have, like many people, have hung out my shingle and continue to do some of the same work around helping companies understand, or even nonprofit organizations, how to build an organization, create that structure, which I learned a lot about, kind of building the airplane as I was flying it, but also around LGBT workplace issues.
Beautiful. Yes. So you're available for that, and you're helping and continue to help. And one of the things I was taught about investments when it came to money and resources is that you want it to be working for you while you're sleeping, right? That's the idea. In your case, your service and the gifts that you gave are working for all of us, even while we're sleeping, because Out and Equal continues, and that work continues, and then you continue by teaching and sharing and continuing the legacy of having it be safe to be who you are and go to work. So we are so deeply appreciative of what you have given of your time and effort and life, and what it continues to give to everyone, and continue to be inspired by that. You're not stopping where you are now. You certainly have earned the rest, but now you're taking us in the direction of paying attention to those who are seeking refuge, and the extra layer that being a lesbian or being gay or being bisexual, transgender adds to that. And the climate that we're in this country, we know that every single person, needs our support and help to be cared for during this really, really challenging time. So, Selisse Berry, I'm so happy that you are on the planet and appreciative of everything that you've done. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Christie. This meant a lot. Love you.
Me too.